Good morning, everybody. I think everybody here today can actually relate to this picture. Now, the vehicle here, for those that are not informed, is an absolute classic. It's a 1963 Corvette. And it's considered as one of the all-time classics ever produced. Most of us are confronted today with a situation where what conventional wisdom prescribes is that we should take this absolute classic in mint condition and we should scrap it simply because it's considered old. Now, old does not mean it's bad. And the purpose of today's session is to actually highlight to you and to share with you what the facts are and what is fallacy. Now, first and foremost, the one thing that we should all recognize is that the platform that we are working on today is considered to be the best commercial transaction processing platform ever produced in the history of computing. It's a fact. People will try and argue and debate around it, but the fact of the matter is the vehicle that we're driving is the best in the combination from a power processor perspective and the IBM I operating system. Yet, this is what our users believe we're actually driving. And I think we need to actually consider very, very carefully why is that the case. Obviously, the most obvious one and the one that everybody immediately actually jumps on is the UI. Yes, the UI is a problem, specifically for the Generation Y and Generation X people that is coming through the ranks. They look at our character-based workstation and turn around and say, but hold on a second, Noah turfed this. Why should we be expected to even use this? Ignoring the fundamental functionality that's encapsulated within the system. And I think it's extremely important that we do realize that this is an issue. However, in our experience, this is the least of our problems, but it's the most visible one. The one that hurts us more is the way that the database presents itself. Now, please recognize that the implementation of the DB2 database engine that we're running on IBM I is one of the most advanced, if not the most advanced, implementation of the DB2 database engine on the platform. However, the way that it's defined is in our old 6-character and 8-character geek speak, as I refer to it, which is our field names and our file names. Now, anybody, and specifically the younger generation management that is coming through the ranks, are all SQL literate. They connect to that database, and they immediately develop an intense dislike and say, well, guess what? This is the first thing that is going, ignoring all of the functionality that's within the application, simply because the way the database presents itself to them, because they can't do anything with it. They need a technician sitting next to them to actually explain to them what that field means. Whereas with very little effort, we can actually expose to them terminology that they are used to, that they're using in the business every single day. Now, this is costing us, and I think it's important that we recognize that. However, this issue is the one that really hurts us, is the old monolithic constructs that we used when we developed our applications in the late 80s, early 90 timeframe. Approximately 80% of your lines of code in your old heritage applications is to do with two things. Number one, database validations. Number two, database relationships. And extremely important is that each of the programs that touches those files in actual fact have to have the same set of validation rules and relationship rules contained in there. If you don't, you end up with gump in your database. Now stand back for a moment and consider what will happen if you can reduce your code base that you maintain today by 80%. Imagine for a moment what is actually going to happen with your productivity. For the first time, you can start spending time on the nice stuff instead of maintaining this thing all the time. Now, the way that you can very quickly test the statement, and I have yet to see an installation where this was not the case. The average backlog at this point in time on all the customers, and I've had meetings all over the world with customers, is about 12 months that they lag behind on their maintenance backlog. The worst that I've heard, best is about 8 months, worst is about 4 years. Now people say, but hold on a second, how is that possible? It's very easy. When you get a change request, invariably there will be either validation or relationship rules that are impacted. You have to go and find every single instance in your applications in order to actually maintain that. That is what's hurting us. So very quickly, in actual fact, and it's very interesting if you start talking to customers that moved away from the platform or are seriously moving away from the platform. The first thing they will actually tell you is the hold on a second, the functionality that we've gotten within this application is remarkable. They will tell you about how reliable the platform is and all those kind of good things. Big issue, big frustration for our users is how long it takes us to, in actual fact, maintain the application, because it impacts directly on the business's ability to stay competitive or to bring new product to market. Now here I'm going to talk to all the programmers here with us, and please, I include myself in the statement. The issues that are truly hurting us today is us, the programmers. Because we're so comfortable in our comfort zone that we've never actually stretched ourselves and stayed up to date with ILE, stayed up to date with what the database engine is capable of, stayed up to date with HTML and specifically our tools. I'm going to turn this question, well, let me put the following question to you. Who of the people here today still use SEU and PDM? Can we have a show of hands? I think that highlights something fundamental. If you're not on RDP, you're doing your company one heck of a disservice. In actual fact, you will pay for the license fee in the first month through productivity increases. Please understand that SEU and PDM will eventually disappear. There is no development effort whatsoever. In actual fact, if you look at all the RPG-free announcements, guess what? SEU doesn't know what to do with it and will never know what to do with it. The point I'm trying to make is that the label that the platform has of being legacy, which is supposedly bad in IT terms, we're the guilty parties. Not the platform, not IBM, us, the programmers. And we need to step up to the plate, recognize that, because until such time that we actually acknowledge that, we can't do anything with it. So we need to actually accept responsibility for this fact. Fact of the matter is, if you don't get with the times, if you don't get with the program, you will lose the platform, which in all probability means you will lose your job. And I'm sorry, it's important that we actually make these statements and that you need to actually recognize the significance of us being in our comfort zone and most of us actually just trying to ride this boat out to retirement. It's not fair to the platform, it's not fair to our companies, and more importantly, I don't think it's fair to our professionalism. Stagnation is death. And most of us, in actual fact, right now, we all know what's busy happening. We need to change. And it's important that each and every one of us actually step up to the plate and say, well, we're going to make this happen. The important thing is to actually quantify upfront whether or not your heritage application still renders significant functionality to your company. Now, in our experience, the mere fact that you're still on the platform actually suggests that that is most definitely the case. And it's very easy to actually just go through the various iterations to in actual fact have a look at, do you have in actual fact a unique piece of code that defines the competitive advantage of your business? Now it's remarkable, and you can in actual fact follow the study or this argument throughout the world. The number of businesses that you can plot the success of the business directly related to the success of the All Systems 38/AS100/IBMI. South Africa, there are many instances. Momentum is a case in point. First time I did business with Momentum in the late 80s, they were number 25 in terms of life assurance in South Africa. Nashua, the SPAR Group, Mediclinic, Medicredit, all of those organizations, in actual fact, if you really plot what has happened to those organizations directly related to the platform. Internationally, there are many, many similar customers. So it's very important to stand back and to truly assess the functionality and then consider carefully whether or not the problems that you experience in actual fact are operational issues. Agility, in terms of the maintenance burden that we just spoke about, in actual fact is an operational issue, it's not a strategic issue. Understand the value of your business and of the application to the business. Assess very carefully whether it's an operational constraint or whether it's truly that the functionality no longer renders something to the company, because then it actually is better to replace or redevelop. So it's extremely important to actually have a look at this and truly look at the functionality cold, to assess that business and to then in actual fact determine, is this something that can take the future or can take the business to the future if you can get rid of those operational constraints. Now typically, as I said, it's the way that it presents itself, the database, the whole issue around agility. And agility hurts us more than most of us actually understand, because our users have an inability to actually, in technical terms, define to us what the real. So very important to actually identify the operational constraints and then put yourself on a roadmap over time. And I think it's important for you to recognize that this is a gradual process. Don't follow this nonsense of the Big Bang approach. I have yet to see a single instance of a Big Bang approach that was successful. Now, very often, if we actually have a look at this whole notion in terms of let's turf our old system, you're actually throwing your competitive advantage away. Think about that. If you're going to implement a new application, what do you think is gone? And what differentiates you from everybody else that implemented the same package? Very little. All of the operational constraints that we've highlighted to you, in actual fact, immediately causes an issue around agility. So what are the options to in actual fact address this real conundrum? And please understand that you're not alone in this. This is worldwide the case. Taking our absolute classic and crush it, or alternatively, what we refer to as enterprise modernization. I think you need to very carefully consider what it is that we're saying here. If you replace your application, at best, you can expect about a 70% functional fit, which means that guess what? The 30% that is missing, you will have to develop all over again. And guess what? The moment you've developed that functionality, you're tied again to something that cannot actually migrate easily. It's important that we recognize that. So guess what? In a couple of years' time, because it's going to take you a couple of years to actually develop that functionality that you've thrown out, you will again sit in a similar position to where you are today. Or alternatively, modernize, where quite often your application from a functionality perspective produces or provides 95% of the functionality requirements that you have. And the part that you're going to miss is your competitive advantage. Now let's stand back for a moment and actually think about this. What are we doing to our companies to actually support the notion of replacement of our applications? Because what we're telling them is take the crown jewels and go and throw it on the rubbish heap. Now, how do companies find themselves in this situation? And here I have to blame IBM. The very thing that in actual fact we all find dear to ourselves the fact that we can take 30, 40-year-old code and run it on the platform and immediately employ the full instruction set of the latest processor design, in actual fact became the Achilles heel. Because what have we've been saying? The mere fact that my application keeps on running on this beautiful platform means it's not broken. I've got news for you. Most of our applications, from an architectural perspective, have been broken since the ILE compiler was introduced to the machine. When we were supposed to actually start taking our code and break it into small little reusable components. Fact of the matter is, it ran, so guess what? We're not going to do anything. We're not going to touch this because it runs. Any one of the other suppliers out there, you bring a new version, or Microsoft brings a new version of .NET out. Guess what they tell you? Sorry to hear about your problem, you will redevelop. It's not a discussion, it's not a debate, you will redevelop. Yet we want to keep on running 30 and 40-year-old code. And that is why I said we need to actually understand that we are the cause for the negative labels and the negative connotations that exist around the platform. Business imperatives, and I think this one is actually was quite a shocker. The cost of modernization, and I'm talking full-scale modernization, comes in between 10 and 18% the cost of replacement. Now you share that with your business people. And they realize that, hold on a second, they have the functionality that they had, yet we got rid of all of the operational constraints. It's a no-brainer. Case in point, we had 2 deals in December, where the moment we engaged with the top people, in both instances, the decision was taken literally in less than a week. The message resonates with the C-levels. So stop having this fear that I don't really want to go and ask for money. If you can highlight to them the value of doing this, it's a no-brainer. And it's not my words, it is the words of senior IT executives globally. Hendrik will briefly share with you his experiences as a company. The reason why I'm walking around with this USB stick is to remind all of you, customs in actual fact forced us not to actually have all of this ready today. I think you all know what it is dealing with SARS and customs. But what we will do is, if you can complete on the document that you've got in front of you, just make a big cross on it, and we will hand deliver all of the materials that were shared today with you, as well as any additional materials we will hand deliver to you. So Hendrik will actually share his experiences with you. There's also 2 additional case studies on this particular USB. Now, fundamentally, what needs to happen is that we have to take our legacy monolith constructs, our program definitions, and in actual fact, over time, and that's the key, over time, in actual fact, decompose it into multi-tier architecture, or you will actually typically hear that the PHP Java programmers in actual fact refer to it as MVC, Model View Controller. We have to separate the database access from the actual core functionality that defines the business rules, and then the user interface. Now, very important is please understand that SOA, services, is just another delivery channel. Fundamentally, what you need to do over time is to, in actual fact, take your database definitions immediately. Step number 1, it's not negotiable. Move from DDS, data description specifications, which is a proprietary way in which we define our databases, and move it to SQL DDL, which theoretically, and please understand it's a theoretical discussion, means that you can now in fact deploy that database on any ANSI SQL compliant database implementation. First step is you have to move from DDS to DDL. It's not negotiable, because as we've just said, 80% of the lines of code that we have belongs in the database engine today. So we need to in actual fact employ all of these constructs to in actual fact facilitate specifically our logical and physical definition of a data layer, trigger programs and I/O servers. That's one of the things that I continuously see, again, internationally. A lot of shops in actual fact bring their Java programmers in, or they bring their PHP programmers in, or whatever. And one of the first things they do is they code the very validation rules that you've got in your database. They recode it in Java or PHP or whatever language spins your motor at this point in time. You're supposed to have a single instance of that. Because imagine for a moment, if the Java programmer did not understand what it was that you were doing in the RPG. And often that is the case, because remember, a lot of this is hidden. They're going to, in actual fact, define that validation in a different way that is done in your database. So now if you end up with garbage in your database, where did it come from? You're supposed to have a single validation rule directly in the database engine and expose that to RPG or whatever language out there wants to consume it. It's a fundamental thing here, because you have to get away from this double maintenance, double-edged sword that we used to. You will end up maintaining approximately 10 to 15% of the lines of code that you use to maintain over time. It's very important to recognize it's over time that this happens. And then very important is to start thinking of rendering your UI, and remember I said SOA is just another UI, rendering that to any device currently and future. The moment you code yourself to actually support the various delivery channels, you did. The average installation today that works directly with the public supports approximately 45 discrete delivery channels. Now that's a nightmare. The question you have to ask yourself is, am I paid to add functionality to the application or support low-level technical implementations? You need to continuously actually ask yourself. So fundamentally, you have to move step one in your modernization roadmap to DDL, and it's not negotiable. IBM has actually been saying this since 2005. Understand that all of the announcements around the platform in terms of compilers, in terms of the platform, presupposes since the turn of the millennium that you're using the SQL engine. So if you not have your data defined in the SQL personality of the database engine, you've been doing your company a disservice for the last 14 years. All of the development on the platform presupposes this. The question is, and this is where, again, I'm sorry to say, but I hold IBM responsible, is they did not facilitate us initially to actually do this in a very easy way, in a non-disruptive way. It was one of the most remarkable things when we started doing what we're doing, when we started talking to companies to actually see the naked fear in the eyes of all the programs, because what are we saying? Is we're saying rip out the old database, bring in the new database, and these people are on their way to retirement. Now that's a very quick way to actually be retrenched or whatever. And as a result, it was immediately, can't do this. It can be done. It can be done very low risk and totally non-disruptive. If there's one message that I want you to leave with today, is to understand the database is the absolute key to your application and your future, and the business's future. Now the question is how to actually go about this. And for this, we will actually quickly share an animation with you.
This is a broad overview of Adsero Optima, which explains the process for automating the migration of your IBM I legacy database from DDS to DDL. A typical scenario encountered on most IBM I systems is a heritage application running off a DDS database, usually written in RPG, that tends to be anywhere between 25 and 30 years old. It is most often a very robust and reliable system, having evolved over time to satisfy the company's requirements, but it's not a modern application. The whole concept around AO Foundation, the first phase of the modernization process, is to modernize the database with absolute minimum impact to the rest of the application. The AO installation is quite a simple process. If you wish, you may download AO from our website to take it for a test drive. For this, you'll receive a test license. The first step in the AO process of converting a schema from DDS to DDL is to identify the structural metadata. For clarification, the data contained in the data files is represented here by a silver color and structural metadata of the files by an empty cylindrical framework. Structural metadata is the information contained within a file which describes the structure of the file and not its contents. AO imports the underlying structural metadata of all the files in the original schema into the AO database. It does not rely on source code to do this. It takes the actual information about the structure of the schema directly from the compiled objects. This guarantees that the correct production version of the schema is imported without having to go looking for the correct source code. Once this process is complete, there is a full definition of the existing DDS schema and its structure within the AO database. No data, just the information about its structure. The next step is to register a new schema within AO and then to clone or make a copy of the original schema's structural metadata within the AO database. This is done without changing, manipulating, or massaging the original structural data in any way. Next, AO works on building a new schema using the cloned copy of the structural metadata as its source. This newly registered schema within AO will be the schema into which AO is going to build the new DDL structures. The aim of this exercise is to build DDL from the cloned DDS structural metadata without changing level IDs in any way. So what AO is doing is building an empty schema based on the original structure which exactly matches the original DDS schema, with the exception that, wherever possible, the files are DDL files. To ensure that the actual rebuild has been successful, AO runs what is called a level ID crosscheck. What this does is pulls the structural metadata from both the original schema and from the new schema, as well as the structural metadata in the AO database, and compares the structural metadata and specifically the level IDs to ensure that they are identical. You'll notice at the top of the screen that the primary objective of this process is to make sure that the level ID in the new schema is exactly equal to the level ID in the old schema. This is the primary requirement for the first phase migration because it means we can switch to the new database without recompiling any application code whatsoever. Once the crosscheck confirms that both schemas are exactly alike, the AO replay function is then used to copy the data from the original schema across to the new schema. The time taken to transfer the data is purely a factor of the volume of the data in the schema. Very large schemas can take a few days to copy, depending on available resources. Once the data is copied, AO Replay continues to make sure that the two schemas are in sync. For example, changes made to the original schema are all replayed immediately to the new schema. Now you can set up a testing environment using the original application and can test your application against the new schema at the same time as the original application is still running completely unchanged and uninterrupted. There is absolutely no interruption to the original application processing at all during the entire process. Once this point is reached, the database architect is introduced. This person is able to use the functionality within AO to maintain the new DDL schema, to add constraints, keys, and triggers, and anything else necessary to modernize or enhance the functionality of the new database and its associated dictionary. This DBA activity is an ongoing function that persists into the future as additions and enhancements are required over time. It is all maintained through a single AO interface. At this point, the AO cross-check is activated in the background subsystem and runs continuously to check that the structure of the schema and the structure as defined in the AO database remain exactly alike. This is to identify any change which may have been made to the schema structure outside of the AO maintenance functionality. Changes made via a backdoor could cause serious problems in the future, including validation errors and data loss. Finally, the stage has been reached where the new schema has been completely tested, all the cross-checks and data comparisons have been done, and everything is working to the user's satisfaction. The old DDS schema can now be phased out, and the original unchanged application can be switched over to the new DDL schema. Even though the actual application remains unchanged, the schema has been converted from DDS to a modern DDL format, providing a solid platform for additional modernization. This has all been accomplished in a couple of days with absolutely no application downtime. So at the end of Phase 1 of the modernization process, you are still running your original heritage IBM I system, but you're running it over a modern DDL schema, providing a solid modern platform for the future.
What we're saying in Phase 1 is it should literally be a slip install of the new database personality. It should be completely, totally transparent to your application. Just think about what it is that I'm saying. If you don't do that, and something fails, where do you start looking for it? Was it now with my conversion process or my migration process to the SQL personality, or was it the fact that I, in all probability, compiled the wrong object? Because it's actually quite remarkable the number of companies that claim, I know exactly where all my source is sitting and what source is in production. We've seen a couple of very interesting results. So as a result, Phase 1, it should be completely and totally transparent to your application, no recompilation of your code, to actually ensure that we can isolate immediately that it actually had to do with a migration exercise. The benefits, as I said, from a business perspective is compelling. I had a meeting on the 11th of December with the MD of a very large co-op in South Africa. And it was literally, in their particular case, they've gone through the exercise to actually cost what it's going to cost them to replace their application. The cost of the total modernization project came in their particular case, less than 10%. He said, I don't have to think about this. And the decision was made on the spot. Understand that your business people, the moment you actually show them this to them, it becomes truly a no-brain discussion. And Heinrich will be able to share some of this. Obviously, immediately, you can render the functionality. The green screen will disappear. You can render your application to the latest and greatest devices out there, including SOA services, if that is what you want to do. Very important. We know that with IBM's latest announcement around both Power, the Power 8 processor is about to ship, as well as Pure Systems, you have at least a published roadmap from IBM that is going to take you to approximately between 2025 and 2030. Now, don't you think you're actually adding significant value to your organization if you tell them, we can take this racehorse that we have, this Formula One vehicle, and extend the life of this application for at least another 15 to 20 years. The message is compelling if you do that. It's very important that you don't get caught up in this legacy perception. In fact, stand back and truly analyze what it is that is causing us walking around with that label and what it is that we can do. We can preserve and add significant new life to our heritage applications, including leveraging the cloud, leveraging social media, leveraging all of the analytics things that is busy coming down the tracks. You can give your business significant competitive advantage using what you have that is proven to the business by using the many innovations available. We're excited. We believe that IBM I has a bright future. In actual fact, if you follow some of the international forums, you will see that there's definitely a resurgence of IBM I. We are on the best platform, we are on the best language. And it's up to us to actually unlock that. Thank you for your time.